22,000 feet above sea level. The year is 1999. A team of archaeologists stands frozen on the summit of Mount Llullaillaco. They've just uncovered something that will haunt them forever. 3 children, perfectly preserved. Skin intact, hair braided, eyelashes still visible. They look like they're sleeping, but they've been dead for over 500 years. The 15-year-old girl sits cross-legged, her head bowed as if in prayer. Beside her, a 7-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, all dressed in elaborate ceremonial clothing, all buried with gold, silver, and precious shells. But here's what makes your blood run cold. These children didn't die from illness or accident. They walked up this mountain willingly. They were chosen, prepared, honored, and then they were sacrificed to the gods in one of the most chilling religious ceremonies. This is the true story of the Capacocha, the Inca ritual that turned children into frozen messengers. To understand what happened on that freezing mountaintop, we need to travel back to the 15th century, to the height of the Inca Empire, the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. At the center of their world was Cusco, the sacred capital, and ruling over it all was the Sapa Inca, believed to be a direct descendant of Inti. The Inca didn't see the world as we do. Mountains weren't just geological formations, they were appas, powerful deities that controlled weather and crops. To communicate with these gods, the Inca believed they needed to offer something precious, something pure, something irreplaceable. They needed to offer their children. This wasn't a dark secret or a practice done in shame. This was Capacocha, one of the empire's most sacred ceremonies, reserved for the most important moments: the death of an emperor, a military victory, or natural disasters. The children chosen for Capacocha weren't victims in the eyes of the Inca. They were the most blessed, destined to live forever among the gods. But here's the disturbing reality that modern minds struggle to comprehend. How do you convince a child to walk to their own death? How does a parent willingly give up their son or daughter? And what kind of society celebrates this as the highest honor imaginable? The selection process was meticulous. Priests traveled throughout the empire searching for children who were physically perfect. No scars, no blemishes, no deformities. Beauty, health, and noble bloodlines were required. Some were as young as 6 years old. Others were teenagers. Once chosen, these children were taken from their families and brought to Cusco, where they would undergo months of preparation. The psychological complexity is staggering. These weren't children dragged kicking and screaming to their deaths. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence suggest many went willingly, even proudly. Because in Inca society, being selected for Capacocha meant your family would be elevated to nobility. Your village would receive honors and resources, and you would become immortal. You would sit beside the gods themselves, advocating for your people for all eternity. But the empire also faced a challenge. The ceremony had to be executed perfectly. The child had to arrive at the sacred site in a state of purity. They had to be calm, compliant, and conscious of the honor being bestowed. Any sign of struggle or impurity could anger the gods and doom the entire empire. The journey to death was a pilgrimage of pageantry. After months in Cusco, where the children were fed the finest foods and dressed in exquisite textiles, the procession would begin, accompanied by priests, nobles, and sometimes the Sapa Inca himself. The chosen children would walk along the legendary Inca road system toward their designated mountain. Imagine the scene, a child draped in Kumbi cloth fabric so fine it took months to weave, wearing a feathered headdress and jewelry of gold and silver. Crowds would line the roads, treating them as living deities. The children were given chicha, a fermented corn beer, and coca leaves to chew, both to honor them and to ease what was coming. As they ascended the mountains, the air grew thinner. At 20,000 feet, every breath becomes a struggle. The cold is bone-deep brutal. Yet these children climbed, sometimes for days, reaching altitudes where even conditioned climbers suffer. Archaeological evidence shows they were periodically drugged with more chicha and coca to keep them docile and to dull the terror. At the summit, a stone platform awaited. The priests would perform final ceremonies, offering prayers to the Apis, to Inti, to Viracocha. The children were given one last meal. Their hair was carefully braided, their clothing adjusted perfectly. Then came the final act. Some were strangled. Others were left to freeze to death in underground chambers. Some, like the 15-year-old girl found on Llullaillaco, were given such high doses of substances that they simply slipped into unconsciousness and never woke up. The 15-year-old girl, later called La Doncella, or the Maiden, sat cross-legged in her final resting place. Modern CT scans and forensic analysis revealed her last hours in horrifying detail. Her lungs showed she had inhaled vomit, suggesting she died while unconscious from the substances. Hair analysis revealed she had been given increasing amounts of these substances for an entire year. The Empire had been preparing her body slowly, deliberately. But here's the moment that changes everything. When archaeologists thawed tissue samples, they discovered something unexpected. Her blood still contained chemical markers of stress. Extreme stress. Despite the drugs, despite the honor, despite the months of preparation, in her final moments, her body knew. It was afraid. The 7-year-old boy was found bound in textiles, his body seated upright. Lightning had struck his burial chamber at some point over the centuries, but his remains were still intact. The 6-year-old girl sat beside them, surrounded by tiny figurines. Llamas and humans made of gold and silver, eternal companions for her journey to the gods. For the Inca priests who performed this ceremony, this was the culmination of months of spiritual work. They believed at the moment of death, these children underwent divine transformation. They were no longer human, they became wakas, sacred objects of worship. Villages would make pilgrimages to these mountains, leaving offerings and prayers, believing the children could hear them and intercede with the gods on their behalf. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1530s, they were horrified by Capacocha and immediately outlawed it. The practice ended, but the children remained, frozen in time at impossible altitudes, waiting 5 centuries to tell their stories. The discovery of the Llullaillaco mummies in 1999 changed our understanding of Inca civilization. These weren't primitive sacrifices, they were scientifically sophisticated ceremonies. The Inca had mastered high-altitude survival, understood preservation through freezing, and had developed complex drugs. DNA analysis revealed the children came from different regions of the empire, showing how Capacocha served to unite diverse populations under one religious practice. Today, La Doncella rests in a specially designed freezer in a museum in Salta, Argentina, kept at -20 degrees Celsius to preserve her remains. Over 100 similar burial sites have been found across the Andes, each child a messenger, each child a sacrifice, each child a window into a civilization that saw death not as an end, but as a transformation. The lesson here isn't to judge the Inca by modern standards. That's historically dishonest. Instead, it's to recognize how powerfully culture shapes our deepest beliefs. What we consider unthinkable, they considered sacred. What we see as murder, they saw as divinity. The Capacocha children remind us that morality isn't universal. It's constructed by the societies we're born into. And perhaps most unsettling of all, if we had been born in the Inca Empire, we might have believed it too. So here's the question I want you to think about. Where do we draw the line between respecting ancient cultures and condemning practices that violate human rights? Should these children be left on the mountains where they were placed, or is it ethical to study them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your perspective on this, because there's no easy answer. If you found this story as haunting and fascinating as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest and most misunderstood moments. Next video, we're exploring the island of the dolls in Mexico, a place where thousands of mutilated dolls hang from trees, put there by a man claiming to be haunted by the ghost of a drowned girl. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I'll see you in the next one.